Today we take a look at the 10 most important events in Halo, starting off with number 10, Awakening the Didact. During the Halo 4 campaign, we come to find out the Forerunners aren't as gone as we thought they were. There's one left alive and entombed within his cryptum. Game after game and book after book, we get spoon-fed tiny bits of information about the Forerunners, who they were, what they were like, but most importantly, their power and technology. So when Chief crash lands on Requiem and inadvertently wakes up the last remaining warrior of this dead race, we end up with a lot of questions. We soon realize that Didact hates humanity and makes the greatest warrior in the galaxy look like a child, tossing him around without firing a single shot. The best part of this sequence is the subtext behind the Didact's power. The warrior was this strong, and yet the Flood still forced the Forerunners into self-exit game. The Didact and his ship proved that the Forerunners were just light years ahead of whatever humanity or the Covenant could imagine. His return to the galaxy and bypassing all of humanity's defenses, even with their brand new ship, in a matter of minutes, demonstrates the power scale of the technology the galaxy has been playing with for the last 100,000 years.
Time was your ally, human. But now it has abandoned you. The Forerunners have returned.
Number 9. Cortana turns evil, the created conflict. Many people hated that Cortana turns evil plot point, and rightfully so. I get it from both points of view, but this marks a new direction for the story that is Halo. Whether for better or for worse, Cortana forcing humanity to no longer rely on AI means two things from a story perspective. The humans will have to be underdogs again. Infinity had signaled the power balance had shifted in the galaxy back to the human favor after 3 decades of being on the losing side of a massacre. Secondly, from a gameplay perspective, it achieves to return us to the feeling of being a super soldier kicking ass in every fashionable style possible. Halo 5's multi-Spartan missions were unsuccessful as opposed to Halo Reach's, because the warriors are supposed to be so battle-hardened and so extreme, it tears the fantasy of the world apart. To see Vale get one-shotted by a knight and having to go pick her up by waving a hand over your own wrist. The created conflict has been mostly discussed and contended to the books, which also works great for those who just want to forget Halo 5 happened and want to move on. You want to deal with these alien monkeys and elites shooting at you instead of Roblox Lego people?
Understand my plan?
Your plan is we do as you say.
Goodbye, John.
Number 8. First Strike. Blue Team destroys the supermassive fleet coming to Earth. The events of First Strike would not be addressed by the games in any meaningful way, but to the expanded universe that is the books, it helps fill in the gaps, starting with how Chief and most importantly how Johnson made it back to Earth uninfected. It helps give closure to what happened on Reach, and the Spartans tasked with protecting it. But the most important part of the story comes by way of rescuing Blue Team and their destruction of unyielding Hierophant. The battle command center containing 500 ships that were gathering in order to launch an attack directly on Earth. The Prophet of Truth had lied, shocker I know, and kept his fleet secret from everyone except his favorite pet monkeys, the Brutes. After escaping Reach, Blue Team discovered this fleet and knew if they didn't stop it in its tracks, Earth would fall within a day. Though Blue Team was successful, this marks a shift in the tide of the Human Covenant War that is rarely ever talked about. The loss of 500 brute ships meant they no longer stood a chance once the elites broke off from the Covenant during the Great Schism. Had these two factions been more evenly matched during the separation of the Covenant, the Flood would have a higher opportunity to grow and escape Delta Halo. The ramifications of this would be unfathomable.
We've been reviewing your report.
You found a Covenant command and control station. It says here they were amassing an invasion fleet of more than 500 ships.
The station was sufficiently disabled, but the threat is still out there.
I have the report, but for the record of this council, what was this fleet's intended target, Spartan?
Number 7. Onyx, Saitan Watinri's death. The Imperial Admiral of the Covenant is the highest military rank. Think of it as the Commander-in-Chief. Zaitan was an instrumental key player in the Sanheli race for decades. His abilities, strength, intellect, and charisma commanded such regard that the prophets feared he could cause their control of the Covenant, leading them to always keep him on the outer edges of Covenant space when possible. He commanded a supermassive fleet, and his word was seen as law amongst the elites. During the Great Schism, he was seen to be a natural leader of the elites. Not the Arbiter, not Ratas, and certainly not Jul and Dama. His death at the hands of a Nova Bomb were explored in the novel Halo Ghosts of Onyx, which also contains the events that led to the Travalian Dyson Sphere. In the games, this has not been explored whatsoever, but in the books, this is the main joint site for the Human Elite Alliance. The events on Onyx separated all other Spartans of importance from the Master Chief, which is why everything from Halo 2 to Halo 5 happens the way it does. Had other Spartans accompanied Chief to the Ark, threw forward onto Dawn, and fought alongside him on Earth and Requiem, things would be radically different. It cannot be understated how this book expands the Halo franchise to a whole new level. Besides expanding on the creation and training of Spartan 3s and how bad the war really was going for humanity, it ties in a lot of the moving parts in the background of the Halo universe. Number 6. The Great Schism, leading to the Human Elite Alliance. I have alluded to this in the rest of this list, but this event single-handedly redefined the conflict at the base of what is the Halo universe. Without the Great Schism, humanity would have lost the war and been wiped out. Even the demigods of war that are Spartans wouldn't have been able to stop the Covenant. The prophets, no, the prophet of truth, got ahead of himself and sided with the brutes a little too early. For honorable mentions, I believe it was better to split them off into two sections. A few events that you could argue being at the top 10, and a few more that you could argue being at the top 1, 2, or 3. For the first lesser major events, we have the release of the Endless. Now you may be thinking, isn't Atriox contacting Mendicant Bias more important? But we have no way to know if that is 6 months prior when the Infinity went down, 6 years in the future when we get more Halo lore, or if that was the day the Master Chief was reawoken. There is so little resolved in Halo Infinite that we don't really have any reason to care about the Endless, or the Banished in my opinion, but next is the creation of the Banished. They are a cool return to form, but what have the Banished accomplished in Halo? They brought down the Infinity and Cortana. The Infinity, for all we know, the most important people survived. It's once again a testament to how little we learned during Halo Infinite. And Cortana? We were coming to end Cortana, so they just did it for us. Speaking of Cortana, Cortana being paired up with the Master Chief is another one. It's a pivotal moment for Chief and his life, his career, and the story of Halo. But that has all been undone with Halo 5 and Infinite. Next, being Cortana's deletion plus the weapon. This one, there's nothing much to say. 343 wrote themselves into a narrative hole, and to dig themselves out, they just recreated Cortana in a slightly more blue than purple. Following along with this is also tied to the events in Shadows of Reach. Basically the story of how Blue Team retrieves the weapon from the underground remains of Castle Base. Two more major but kind of minor events are everything that happens on Harvest leading up to both Halo Wars 1 and 2. While don't get me wrong, I love both Halo Wars, I think they add absolutely nothing to the story. Take them out and the universe remains the exact same, and Harvest being the point of first contact also means nothing. The Covenant were bound to find humanity, find out there were Reclaimers, and start a war for it. Whether it was Earth, Reach, or Harvest, their fates were sealed from the moment the Prophets manipulated all the races for control. That being said, we finally move on to number 5, Prophets learning humanity are Reclaimers. The Prophets of Mercy, Truth, and Regret finding out they were not the Reclaimers and instead it was humanity was most certainly a blow to the Covenant religion. Their great journey was nothing, less than nothing. It was a simple mistranslation, because if the truth was discovered, they would be doomed. They ousted the previous Covenant leaders to gain power and keep the Covenant together, knowing their weak and deformed selves would not survive a minute if the elites or brutes found out, ultimately leading to half of the events on this list by starting the Human Covenant War.
What's the matter, big shot? Can't start your own party?
I admit, I need your help. But that secret dies with all the rest.
Are you sure about that?
Number 4. The discovery of Halo by humanity. Now you may be thinking, how is this number 4 if that's the premise of the very first game? Humanity discovering Halo means next to nothing without a little context. The ring blew up, so the Covenant gained nothing more than slight validation that the rings were real after all. This did lead to the Great Schism, but that had already been set in motion by the time the ring was found. The other major factor here is the galaxy reawakening the Flood. Yes, there is a grave mine technically at this point already on Delta Halo, but it is the horrors of the Flood which make some elites like the Arbiter and Rataz Vadum question the Prophets to begin with. I would put this higher on the list, but ultimately it earns nothing for the human faction. It does have some repercussions for the UNSC as far as the books go, but those wouldn't begin to affect the universe until the 4-year period while Chief was asleep after Halo 3.
Cortana, all I need to know is did we lose them?
I think we both know the answer to that.
Number 3. The creation of the Spartan 2 program. This is so high on the list for a single reason. Catherine Halsey may not have known the Covenant were coming, but her program single-handedly saved humanity. It would have crushed the insurrection with ease and made the galaxy much safer for humans had the Covenant not shown up. But Spartans are at the core of every major battle and win that held off the Covenant from entirely wiping out humanity to begin with. Colony after colony, the UNSC lost ship after ship with only a handful of naval battles won, but always at the cost of more of their ships than the enemies. Their best chances often came with having a Spartan infiltrate a Covenant ship and blow it up from the inside. Let's take it one step further. Spartans are the beacon of hope that's shown in the UNSC. Because they were rallying points on the battlefield, they turned tides and kept morale high. They stopped the breach of the Cold Protocol in the regular. After the war, they were the only ones who were sent on real missions, while the Spartan 3 stayed back to train the great value Spartans. For those of you in Europe, that's the Tesco Extra Spartans. The destruction of the Flood, 2 Halo rings, the Ark, the Didact, aka the overpowered warlord, and the defeat of the leader of the created uprising, Cortana, is all possible to one single Spartan 2. So yeah, imagine the Covenant find humanity but Spartans don't exist. They do a speedrun on how fast they can commit galactic genocide with the Halo rings.
Hey, check it out.
No way. A Spartan?
For real? You better not be.
No, man, he's here. We're gonna be
Where
all
did you
right.
find him?
Napping, out back.
Number 2. The Forerunner Flood War. Now I have to put this near the top. While 95% of what we know about this war comes from the books and Halo Legends, it is the cause of all problems in the Halo universe. The Forerunners losing the war and committing galactic server reboot was the only reason anything happens. Without the rings, there is no Covenant religion. Sure, the elites, prophets, and a bunch of races would have found themselves worshipping some ancient ruins, but eventually they would grow out of it considering the ruins would not react to anyone but humans. That being said, there wouldn't be any ruins if the Forerunners had just won the war against the Flood. Now, I may make it sound like an easier said than done task, but humanity had all but beat the Flood until the Forerunners forced them into a two-front war. Any and all conflicts arise by the Forerunners having such a large ego that they couldn't accept not being the masters of their galaxy. Even without all the Forerunner technology littered around the galaxy like a child getting bored of their toys, the Forerunners resetting all races to a not so even playing field is how it all ends up with everyone at war and on the brink of extinction again.
25,000 light years. That is the effective range of this installation. According to the star charts archived on board this installation, I estimate that there are 3,792 worlds capable of sustaining biological sentient life within that 25,000 light year range.
The honorable mentions for the top spots, here is where we have the other events that I thought worthy of the top 3 to close out before revealing the most important events. The creation of the Covenant. This is very specific, as if the prophets had found another race first, the Covenant would most certainly not exist. Maybe with the brutes, but it would have taken a lot longer for the two to come to peace. The prophets finding the hunter worms, for example, would have meant they would have had to suck it up. They would try to send puny prophets, and the worms would slaughter them. The grunts were not strong or smart, but they were many and adapted fast. The drones weren't really conquered. They kinda joined because they liked Forerunner relics too. The human Forerunner war is arguably the most important, as all the stories in the Halo universe either stem from it or are the conclusion of events past. It is everything that has been covered on this list, while at the same time more and a source of infinite stories that could have taken place during that time. Like my stories from the Halo universe, shameless plug, there's 100 written Halo stories and 1,000,000 left to be told. As I mentioned earlier, the events in Ghost of Onyx are very important, but sadly only the extended lore matters there. If these events were touched upon during a Halo game, movie, or show that wasn't garbage, then they would be ranked way higher. Both battles for Earth are very important for the narrative of Halo, but I think they were brushed off real easily as we spent half of Halo 2 on Delta Halo and don't see just how bad the Covenant left behind is tearing up Earth. This is the same as once again we come back to Earth on Halo 3, the Covenant had just about killed everyone. The population of Earth goes from about 10 billion to 200 million. That's 2% people left on Earth. This is a few months that need way more exploration in the Halo mythos, as this is the place with the second biggest battle. One last point I want to touch on before number 1 is the Master Builder. Now people who haven't read the Forerunner trilogy are like, who? What? The Master Builder was basically the leader of the Forerunners. The Didact was the war general, while the Master Builder was like the president. He made the bigger decisions, and being a builder meant he was ultimately responsible for everything we see of the Forerunners, from the Halo rings to shield worlds, to weapon forges and sentinels. My point here is the creation of the Halo array was not originally to wipe out all sentient life in the galaxy. It was more of a passion project to show off that they could create them. It wasn't until Flood and the late stages of the war when they considered making the rings into super weapons. But the Master Builder finally relenting and agreeing to build more and turn them into galactic cleansers has to be up there in the most significant events, alongside Born Stellar Didact deciding to fire them.
If we don't make it,
We'll make it.
it's been an honor serving with you, John.
For number 1, The Fall of Reach. Now I couldn't possibly leave this off the list. I would have gotten 20 hitmen outside my door by the time this video was done rendering. The Fall of Reach marks something special within the Halo universe. I want to transcend the story for a moment, as Reach was the last time a lot of people picked up a Halo game. It was supposed to be the final story to be told in this universe. It was an emotional one that sent us all out in a bang. I want to get real with you for a moment. When I first beat Halo Reach, trying to survive the onslaught of the Covenant as a lonesome Spartan outnumbered and outgunned, I was thinking of the entire narrative. Like the marketing campaign said, we knew the end from the beginning, and since we never heard of these Spartans before Reach, we knew none of them made it. But I was not emotionally prepared. Upon seeing my Noble 6 that I had spent hours playing as, thinking there wouldn't be any more Halo games, this is the last time I walk in Spartan shoes. I cried watching him die. When I tell you I cried, boys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, I have cried 4 times in my life. Past being a literal baby, that is. And that was one of them. I know that I may be the only one who went that far, but I remember yelling at my screen, why didn't the Pelican come back for him? Now we take a look at the Fall of Reach from a narrative point of view. This was it. This was the end of the Human Covenant War. Any story being told in the Halo universe would end or start here. Reach was the biggest colony humanity had, meaning the glassing of the planet set humanity back 500 years, back to a single planet species. We know there was more colonies out there, but those didn't matter. They don't matter within the story itself, because the UNSC recalls 60% of all its forces in order to protect Reach and leaves the others defenseless to protect Earth. But they still fail. And it's not a near fail, it's an utterly colossal defeat. We experienced the Fall of Reach from several points of view throughout Halo media, but Noble Team, all of them sacrificing one by one, is what happens to every single soldier, man, woman, and child on the planet. At first, it's to stop the Covenant from finding Reach. Then it's stopping them from destroying Reach. Then it's just save one another. The people that share foxholes, trenches, and brush shoulder to shoulder while facing down death. Then it's just trying to survive for themselves. Until ultimately, all hope is lost of anyone surviving this. And giving a small group a chance to have a tomorrow. Maybe that tomorrow will come. Maybe that tomorrow will save someone. Maybe that tomorrow will pay off. But the way this war had gone, that tomorrow could just be the same as yesterday. After the Fall of Reach, humanity was not willing to spare a single ship to confirm the glassing of the planet. They knew their days were outnumbered. The Covenant were coming to Earth and retreated every last human ship back to make their last stand on Earth. They sent out orders for anyone who did not make it back to Earth to go out and do as much damage against the Covenant as they could, knowing there wouldn't be a home for them to return to. A final Hail Mary pass to simply exist. The Fall of Reach signaled the end of hope itself, which is why I believe it was the most important event in the Halo universe. Feel free to let me know in the comments what your top 10 looks like, or why I should move up or down certain events. The rational part of my brain says that the Fall of Reach shouldn't be number 1, but every fiber of my being fought against that decision, and ultimately I had to place it as number 1. The emotions it invokes within a whole generation of people who played Halo certainly point to this being number 1. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.
Spartans never die, George. They're just missing in action.